All right, hello everyone. I'm Jack Kerrigan. I'm Chair of the Planning and Zoning, and welcome. And I'd like to call this meeting to order for the July 8th Planning and Zoning. Stanley, would you like to take roll call?
Ms. Gardner? Here. Mr. Elzey?
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Crease is absent. Mr. Cox?
Here.
Mr. Henderson?
Here.
Mr. Fasagi?
Here. All right, the first order of business is swearing in of our new members, so I'm going to turn that back over to Tim.
Okay. Mr. Henderson? If you will stand and raise your right hand.
Okay. I, Larry Henderson, do affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and the state of Florida, that I will support and defend the ordinances of the city of Mexico Beach, that I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state and the charter of the city of Mexico Beach, and I will well and faithfully perform the duties of the Planning and Zoning Board of the city of Mexico Beach, on which I am about to enter. So help me God.
Mr. Fasagi?
Okay, let's see. I, Eric Fasagi, do affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and the state of Florida, that I will support and defend the ordinances of the city of Mexico Beach, that I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state and the charter of the city of Mexico Beach, and I will well and faithfully perform the duties of the Planning and Zoning Board of the city of Mexico Beach, Florida, on which I am about to enter, so help me God.
So which one is alternate post one and which one is alternate two?
Mr. Fasagi is 2 and Mr. Henderson is 1.
So for purposes, voting purposes tonight.
So that your code requires an absence, and then if there is an absence of a regular member, then alternate post one may vote.
That's what I want to
And then if for some reason alternate post one was absent and the regular member was absent, then alternate two could vote. So you only get to vote if two people are missing
Understood.
instead of just one.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear in advance. Okay, on the consent agenda, the minutes of the May 6th, 2024 Planning and Zoning meeting. Thank you for leading that. Welcome. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes? Are there any questions of the minutes? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Gardner makes a motion. Lee Elzey has a second. Maybe would you like to call for a vote?
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Elzey?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
The minutes for the May 6, 2024 meeting are approved. All right, the first item on the regular agenda is a variance request for 3114 Highway 98. The agenda says Alara Mills Gutcher, but I think we're going to have Lance come up and present that first. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Lance Watson, Southeastern Consulting Engineers. And I'm not sure who all was at the workshop that we had, but just to kind of go back over that. And I've also, if you guys don't have, looks like you got it. If y'all don't have site plans, I've got some extras if you need one. But so all of this property, a portion of the city roadway is on the property, and that is it does two things. It reduces the availability for impervious area, but it also requires the reason we're asking for this variance is to be able to use some space within the setbacks to offset some of the property that is taken by this city roadway. And so what's being, and I'm sure everybody already knows the intent is for a grocery store. And so the variance is being requested, and it's in the packet, but 9.7 feet on the front, well, I'm gonna do it off of the north, south, west, but on the west property line, what's being requested is 3.2 feet. On the north, what's being requested is 1.3 feet, and on the south, 9.7 feet. And the intent of the applicant is to, in return of getting this, being granted this variance, is to deed the city the portion of the roadway, which is on the, there's an area sheet, the one with the colors on it. The green is the area of the roadway that's in the parcel, and that's 1,628.17 square feet. And the intent of the applicant is to, upon receiving this variance, deed that portion over to the city, so the city own right of way rather than on private property. And also, I wanted to, there's the variance, inside the variance package, it does mention the setback variance request, which is what we're asking for, but it also mentions an increase in the allowable impervious area, and I just wanted to put on the record and definitely in the motion, make sure to mention that that's not being requested. So what we've done is reduce the proposed impervious area, and that with permeable pavers, and that allows us, since that is in the comp plan, that allows us to get under that, I think it was 92% before, but with the permeable pavers, that puts us at 85.75%. So we're under the land development code requirements, so that portion of the variance is not being requested. So we, I just want to make sure that was included in the motion. I think that's it. It's pretty simple request, and if you guys have any questions, I'm available for anything you have.
Okay. Thank you, Lance. New consultant with Alara, the planning collaborator, is going to kind of walk us through the request
Yes.
here and which conditions have been met and how so.
Absolutely. For the record, Alara Mills-Gutcher with the Planning Collaborative, working on behalf of the City of Mexico Beach. And in your packet, there is an analysis I conducted based on the application that Lance submitted regarding the points of the allowances for the variance, which the city adopted last year. I believe it was in May by ordinance 811. So that is the criteria that we now look at when we review the variance application requests. And just to go over again, what was requested is a front, which is the south side of the building, setback to 9.7 feet, a rear setback to 1.3 feet, and there's also setbacks requested for the southwest and the northwest corners, which are 4.5 feet and 3.2 feet respectively. And you might notice some of that on the site plan that was submitted as part of the application. So when we look at this, we go to the section 7.04.02 Part D of the Mexico Beach Land Development Code, which outlines the standards of review for all of the variance applications that we receive. There have to be certain special conditions that are met, and the point test must be met for you to have a favorable recommendation to the City Council for the approval of the variance. One of the first points is the special conditions require physical circumstances on the parcel that are particular to that piece that are not applicable to other parcels in the same zoning category or elsewhere in the city. And we found that this is met because of the issue with the impervious surface and the encroachment onto the private property of approximately as a calculation of the applicant of 1,628 square feet. And so if you look at his schematic, his site plan, you can see that impervious surface his parcel actually goes out into the driveway. That when we are driving that way and we hit the stop sign, we're actually on the private property. So I found that requirement is met. The second point is that there are no actions of the property owner, and this is not a self-imposed hardship, which we found to be met because, of course, They did not. The city paved that area and created that hardship. The third is the relief is granted as a minimum degree of relief necessary to make possible the reasonable use of the property. And the reason why I noted this one was partially met because when he submitted the application, he also was requesting that impervious surface maximum be increased. So because we can't issue, and that is a comprehensive plan policy, so the commercial category in the comprehensive plan has a maximum impervious surface allowance of 90%. So we can't issue a variance from the comprehensive plan, just the land development regulations. So that's why this one was noted as partially met, because I was reviewing the application based on that request also. Since that's been withdrawn, I would find that this criteria is also met. And that number 4 is literal interpretation of the provisions of this code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties that are subject to the same regulations. And again, we're going back to that hardship of where the city has paved onto private property to find that this point has also been met. The 5th point is the grant of the relief will not be in degradation of the general intent and purpose of this code, which I did find also to be met. Otherwise, the development generally meets the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. And then finally, the issuance of the variance will not create an inconsistency from the existing character of the surrounding site, which we also found to be met, as it is going to be in line with Mango Marley's and on the footprint of the lumberyard laydown area that's there now. So there wasn't nothing that kind of degraded the area. So the recommendation, of course, we'll remove that point about the denial of the impervious surface because that was withdrawn by the applicant, but a recommendation of approval for the setbacks on the front, rear, and the corners. There is no requirement for the side setbacks because the side setbacks are 0 in the land development regulations, so he doesn't need a variance for those. So as recommended in the end of my staff report, I recommend that we list those setbacks to be met in the motion.
Anyone have any questions of Laura? Anything else? Is that it?
That's all I have.
I did have one more thing, if it's okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention this before we got to the motion. I wanted to mention that while right now the front setback variance request is 9.7 feet, I wanted to note, if we could note this in the motion, once that property is deeded to the city, that 9.7 will not be 9.7, it'll be close to 0. Because it's right on the edge of the sidewalk right now, which is 9.7 feet. So that's based off the current parcel lines. Once that's deeded to the city, that 9.7 moves closer to where the proposed building is at the edge of the sidewalk.
So does the net of that mean that once that property is deeded, that would no longer be a request for variance in that particular place?
So once the property is deeded, yes, he will still need the variance because he needs a setback.
It'd be a greater at that time.
If we could base it more off the site plan than the 9.7.
They're trying to get a footprint approved here.
So at this point, it becomes a legal question as to whether or not he can reduce his request based on what's already been advertised.
Well, what did the advertisement say? Did it specify the actual distances of the setback, or did it just say that variances were being considered?
That's a question for Tammy.
Off the top of my head.
That is set back to the existing property line specified.
So was there a newspaper ad, Tammy, or a county posting on the website?
On the website.
What we're asking for is still accurate, but after the fact, the condition of the variance is that then it's deeded. We just want everybody to understand that those numbers are gonna change after that, the city accepts the deed for the roadway.
Is that the only number that changes?
Yes, sir.
That you don't have the advertising here?
I do not.
So, Zach, I've just got a random question. Since you're in real estate and you're very familiar with commercial development, is it typical to have a city right-of-way through what most of us deem a parking lot?
Nobody I can find's ever heard of one.
I can't, I've looked high and low, and I can't, usually a commercial development, the tenants or the property owner of the development they own the parking lot and they maintain that and there's no right-of-way
It's always,
responsibility. It creates a can of worms, I think, on both sides.
it's always been a city right of way, or since I think the 50s when they recorded Mexico Beach Shopping Center there. But apparently they got some grant, maybe in the 90s, is the story some people are telling us, and they went and paved without surveys. So that's how we got to where we're at.
Well, if that's all that you
That's all I
have,
have.
Laura,
Yep.
go ahead, like to open it up to the public for public comment. So, would anyone from the public, and that can include you, Zach, if you like, but would anyone like to come up and share anything on this?
I guess I just got a question.
If you'll come up, please, and state who you are and where you live, we'll start with that.
Good afternoon, I'm Thad Boswick. I live here in Mexico Beach. I have a property on 31st Street. I was sent a letter, official letter, asking me to come to this, and I really just trying to understand it more than anything. I don't know the property owners. It's in a limited partnership, so I don't know anything about it until I saw something on the website about the agenda for being a grocery store. So the Southeast letter that I received just gave me some very vague information. So just trying to understand it from what's been done. It sounds like it meets all the variance codes. Are we here because a variance is being requested, or is it zoning? If it wasn't for the variance, then they could do you could build whatever. You could build this grocery store at that location if it weren't for the variance request.
Right, well,
Is that correct?
The way I read it, the reason it's on the agenda tonight is for a variance to the setback.
Yes, sir. So we could roughly, Lance knows the numbers better than me, but with no variances, they could do a 9,200, 9,300 square foot store right there. With the variances, it's going to be closer to 10,000 because of the situation with the road and being owned by the property. I mean, the whole stop sign is owned by the property, so we've got to clean this up. So we've met with the city a few times starting in April, and maybe, it's a trade out here where it works for the city and you can build a little bit larger store, a little bit more like you should. Based off the size of the property, you'd be able to do 12,000, but since so much of it's in the right of way, they're kind of trading out here as an ask.
Which is unfortunate, but I get it. Whatever happened back then is kind of grandfathered in. So we're only here for a variance due to the fact that it's the requirement for the parcel is interfering with the city highway, and you need to do a variance.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, so the
So
use
otherwise
is
it-
allowed, the use is allowed by
The
the
use
zoning.
is allowed.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to understand that. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't be having the discussion, I guess.
That's correct.
Okay. Good, and then parking, I don't know, we talk about the city street is interfere with the parking. I agree with you. It's usually a situation where you don't create businesses without proper parking.
I can speak to that a little bit if it's okay.
So what's the plan
So
for parking?
The parking for the uses in all of the business center is included in the business center itself. So all the parking in the business center is intended, and it was originally intended for all of the businesses and all the properties in the area. And there used to be a grocery store right on the other side of Mayor Mall, is that correct? So that was always used for, all this parking is shared, and then, back in 90, whenever they added this additional parking, that added to it. And so because parking, even though it's all included, the applicant wanted to allow extra parking and plan for that. So you'll see on the west side there, the variance that we're asking for on that side. We, as far as building footprint, we could have, and most folks would have probably asked to go all the way to the property line on the west side. We didn't do that because he wanted to include some additional parking. So what we've done is included some full-size parking on the west side, and then on the north side, included some additional parking for compact vehicles and low-speed vehicles, golf carts, and that sort of thing. So that was the intent, and why we did go all the way to that western property line is to add some additional parking, but the business center encompasses the parking, so there's no additional parking requirements or stormwater requirements for anything constructed in the business center.
So the west side and north will accommodate a full-size vehicle?
The west side,
Just the west side.
The north side will be compact vehicles and low-speed vehicles. I would assume, just based on what we've seen over the last few years, is that will probably get used a pretty good bit by golf carts, if I would imagine. Just because we see a lot of that now, a lot more so than we did 5-6 years ago, even before Hurricane Michael. So that kind of gives a little bit of an additional parking area in addition to what's already included in the business center.
We wish there were more parking, no doubt, but it's kind of, it
Yeah,
meets
you
the
can find it.
requirements, but they're still adding 8, even though that wasn't required, because we know practically the more we can get, the better.
And also too, in those parking areas on that back alley, that's where they will do their deliveries. And they do their deliveries at anywhere from 1 to 3 in the morning. And any daytime deliveries, which is very, very rare, that it would be there. They have a warehouse in St. Joe where they stock material, or they stock goods. And so they have small trucks the box trucks that if they need anything throughout the day, so it wouldn't be big semis coming in, but most of their deliveries are gonna be in the middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Good to know. Good to know.
And the applicant is Mr. Duran, who built Gulf Foods originally and runs the Piggly Wiggly. He said this probably won't be branded as a Piggly Wiggly, but if you missed the workshop, that's who will be doing the store. So they're
I'm sorry, who's the owner?
Mr. Duran, George Duran, Duran's Piggly Wiggly in Port St. Joe. He was also the guy that built Gulf Foods back in the 50s or 60s.
Okay. And this was formerly a grocery store? in that area?
There was one on the other side of Mango Marley's.
Okay.
That's always been a restaurant.
Do we have any idea what traffic this is gonna create above and beyond what's, acceptable for a commercial spot? It would seem like to me that there would be some level of increased traffic.
There would be an increase. We had a traffic study on, this isn't a development order request, so we haven't done any traffic studies or anything like that, but per the City of Mexico Beach requirements and the business center requirements, traffic study wouldn't be required for this. We could do one if anybody was just curious, but that would be in the development order stage. Right now, it's just a variance application to be able to build into those setbacks. And then next, we'll still have to come with a development order application. That will have to be approved for the placement, elevation, that sort of thing. And then after that is even another submittal for the building permit for the actual structure itself. So there'll be 2 more sets of meetings on this, as we move forward. This is just for the setback variances.
For the variance piece?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So as far as the parking lot that's there, that was deemed at some point appropriate for the business center. The business center had a grocery store there. It was on the south side of, adjacent to Mango Marley's and Castaway's restaurant. It was there at a different time and other businesses were there, but that parking lot has served the businesses that existed on that property, just as it will serve the next business. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And I think over at Gulf Foods, there were parking issues at Gulf Foods. I mean, Zach got an office there. I think there are parking issues at Sunset Park right now, but.
You're gonna have, that sort of thing in this size area we're in with the influx of people, especially like the 4th of July, without a restaurant, everywhere you go is a parking problem. So different times, especially, the 2 or 3 big weeks out of the year, you've got spring break, 4th of July, Labor Day, you're gonna have that no matter what. But
Understand that well, very well. I mean, my hopes were that we could get a grocery store, right? I think all of the residents and citizens would welcome that. It would just not be at that location. We need it. We need something that is what I would hope would be more of a brand commercial business and known a grocery chain or franchise. But I understand that we're also a small community with seasonality that may not support it. So I welcome more commercial space than I do residential. We definitely need restaurants. We definitely need more hardware, or not hardware, but certainly shopping. And I would agree that a grocery store would be nice to have. For me, then there's further requirements to do the development after the variance. So we'll get to see that as we look at the development plans and things of that nature, and have some additional discussion on it.
That's correct.
But my hopes are that at some point we would utilize space that's less congested, more off the beaten path of 98, where we've got 386 out there. I don't know the use codes, and there's,
Well, there will be executive meetings on this, and that opportunity will arise, but for tonight, it's just on the matter of the variance.
well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to comment? All right, if not, I'll close the public discussion and open it up to the board discussion.
I have a general question before it gets specific. The only other variance request that I participated in as a quasi-judicial, whatever it was totally different in the way it was approached than this one. Is there any, as long as we're okay, not as far as the variance request, the way that we're acting around the table, we're good with that?
Well, I wasn't part of that variance either, that was Carly, if I
Right.
recall correctly. But as a quasi judicial hearing, usually you're sworn
You
in.
swear 'em in.
Yeah,
But technically, the variance will be decided by the city
City
council
council.
and not you guys. So this was a public hearing more than anything else on the variance. If you want to go back and swear the gentleman in just to say, is that true and correct, everything you've said, then that can be done. If you want to do that, Tammy can swear him in.
My only concern is that we want to do it proper going forward so that there's no hiccups along the way. That's my only concern.
Yeah, in the future, probably it'd be good to start with swearing everybody in that's going to talk, but this one didn't get started that way,
Okay.
so.
If we need to go back and do that, I'm happy to do that.
We'd be happy to do that if it means no hiccups.
Let's do that.
It'll check box, so if
Now,
you, Tammy, will you swear him in?
I think
If there's
anybody.
anybody else that's gonna be speaking, you can stand up as well, yeah. You ready? Do you swear, raise your right hand, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Yes.
And do you swear that everything you stated before the planning and zoning board is true and correct?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And
I do.
complete?
Yes, sir.
All right, other questions?
So I have some questions. Yeah. With respect, so I came to this meeting with a number of questions that sound like they're for later for the actual development order, but I do have a question about that as it pertains to the variance. So I can start with the variance. I can bring up my other questions that probably are for later. This has to do with traffic and access and local residents.
Let's start with the variance and we'll
Okay,
let
so-
anybody else have questions regarding the variance.
Yeah. So I don't have any questions for the west, south, or the east side. I have questions for the variance on the north side, which is in the alley. It looks like it's 1.3 feet. So I heard in the meeting on Friday, I believe it was Mr. Dern, sorry, he wasn't on camera, mentioned about the delivery trucks are going to be in the back alley. That is a city right-of-way for sort of an exit of traffic from folks generally probably coming to the hardware store. And they exit out on 32nd if they so choose. My question has to do, it's sort of related to the small vehicle spaces that you guys have planned with the compact or the low-speed vehicles. I drove that alley today, even though I've driven it a lot of times, and I noticed that there's a light pole, there's a power pole, as well as a sort of descending at a 45-degree angle guy wire that seems to be right in the way.
It's in the far east parking space right now, but, so that could be, and still being in line with this property, that could be shifted slightly to the east, and the guy wire can come down, if one guy wire or two can come down at a lesser angle.
In a different, yeah, so I didn't see either of them on the plans. I did see the water meter, and they're like another 5 or 6 feet to the west of the water meter. So I was wondering if that was sort of considered as far as the location of the parking spots, which feeds into the variance.
So I just want to make it aware that we're not looking at the development right now.
Right.
We're
That's
just
right.
looking at, so we're not looking at that kind of detail. Just understanding the setback requirements. So I don't have a site plan to respond to right now because he hasn't officially signed
That's fine.
one in for the development review. So I would hate to get down on a rabbit hole, but
Well, so I have sort of a second part of my question. I've got an app on my phone where I can pull up publicly available private records and their property lines, and it's mine from the tax records. It's all public information. I noticed that the city owns the right of way. That the city owns the back alley, but it looks like the property line is a few feet on the other side of the alley, and right now there's a bunch of trees there. There's a couple of palm trees, there's a couple of deciduous trees, and they're just sitting there. There's a vacant lot behind them. Where I'm going with this is, I'm wondering if those trees could be taken out, if they are indeed on city property. Is that a more appropriate location to put these parking locations on the other side of the alley and not on the store side of the alley, which would maybe not need the variance?
so we have to be careful when we look at the property appraiser data and the parcel lines with the aerial photography because they're not off by inches. They
They're
can
not.
be off by
Exactly.
50 feet.
Sure.
So when he supplies a survey of the property, we can determine that kind of thing. But it's hard. We can't really look at the property appraiser right
I
now
understand.
with the aerial because it doesn't match the projections of each that they use between the aerials, and they just don't match. So we can't really determine.
Just a general question though, was there any consideration given to doing parking on the other side?
So the property line is actually 8 feet to the south of the edge of pavement in the alley. So that property line doesn't extend past,
Doesn't extend past.
into or north of the alley.
Okay. So when you say property line, you mean the private property line?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going with city line. Where does the city line, and with the city, does the city even allow putting parking spots on city-owned property? If in fact it does exist on the other side of the alley?
It has been done, yes, and that's even so. And a good example is, and I don't want to get into the weeds of development order type questions, but a good example is Driftwood Inn. I did the design on Driftwood Inn, and a letter was given from the city to use the city-owned, where the right-of-way extends to the beach right there, to use that and improve the Driftwood Inn, improve that to access additional parking on the side, in return providing a sidewalk. So that has been done in the past with a council approval, which would be, if it were, when it gets to the development order stages with these parking spaces, parallel parking spaces proposed in the right-of-way, that would be part of the request to the council at the time of development order.
There is a plat that Chris gave me on this area, correct, Chris?
Yes.
It outlines the streets that are dedicated. I didn't bring it with me, but that might be helpful in going forward for you to look at when the time comes on the development order application to consider that. But as Ms. Mills has said, it's not really there at this point in time. This is just about the variance on
Sure.
the setback.
Okay. Yeah, so that's it for my questions about the variance. I had other concerns that are having to do with the development order, but we can.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be a different time. So, anyone else have any questions regarding the variance?
Okay, and just for your clarification, Tammy does not have the publication of what was published for this meeting, so I don't have that to review and give you an opinion on that when we're
I for one, as almost a lifelong resident of this place, I'm glad to see that we're trying to work this out. We do need a grocery store. We had a grocery store. We had a grocery store on this property at one point. acknowledge the issue that we have in this council where commercial property is sort of eroding to residential use. And isn't it true that on this location, if a developer wanted to, they could place condominiums?
No, so the Mexico Beach Shopping Center, maybe the reason these are getting saved is you cannot do any residential. So that's part of the Charlie's plat 6 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Charlie Parker.
He sold one
That is.
spot, we're not gonna condo it up.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Chris and I talked about that. I
We could
believe,
use a couple more.
yeah, I don't think that is the case at the Gulf Foods property or the Sharon's Cafe property or even the Fish House property. Those could be developed as residences.
Fish House is part of it. This all came up when I sold the Civic Center. I volunteered and sold that after the hurricane. And we got deep with the attorneys. Some people were trying to put townhouses and they found something from the 60s or 70s that prevented any residential for the whole shopping center.
All right. And parking is going to be a challenge, but, you know, working together, hopefully we can do the best we can with that. So,
When you think about it, Jack, you're right. The Fish House was there. It was always packed. The, not the Grove, the Beach Walk. Wasn't that the name of the store
Beach
where the
Walk
old
was the
grocery
store.
store
We had
used to
another
be?
business on the other side of the
And it
hardware
passed
store, which
away.
was a
Yeah.
laundromat, which
Yeah.
had different people,
Yeah.
different usage, so
So
the
when
whole
you
place was
start-
full.
Yeah, so when you start adding the cars up from 2 restaurants, a laundromat, and a thriving souvenir clothing store, I mean, I don't think that could be, I don't think 4 businesses or any more cars, I just don't see that being an issue. I am thankful we had the marina that come in and we had a place to go shop after the storm. I'm thankful for the market that we have. I hope that one day we'll have something bigger, but I'm ready to see. I'm ready to see it.
It's, I run a business in Mexico Beach and have for a long time. It's not easy to run a business. It's not easy to bring employees in to live here, the cost of living. And I don't know how many groceries you need to sell until you break even, but I think we know what we're getting here. It's someone who's proven it in the area and done a good job of running a grocery store. So I'm just thankful that someone is willing to pursue this.
And he's very involved in the community. When you go to St. Joe, I mean, Mr. Durham donates to every baseball, football, whatever. I mean, he's very community minded. I hear that point, but I mean, he really cares about our community. I'd much rather have somebody wanting to put a grocery store in that cares about our area and is from here than somebody that lives in God knows where and could care less about us. Just our money.
I'm ready to make a motion. How specific do I need to be?
Well, you would condition upon a review of the publication. You would either recommend to the city council to grant the variances as requested, or you would.
We'll make it that simple. I move that we recommend to the city council to grant variances as requested with the exception of the impervious,
Second.
whatever the last part of that was.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Elzey, a second from Mr. Cox. Is there any discussion? All right, would you like to?
So you're missing one regular member,
Yeah.
We
and
are.
so you will vote as the first alternate, so to speak.
All right, go ahead with your call.
Okay. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Elzey?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for your comments.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, the next and final order of business is ordinance 838, proposed amendment for sign section of LDC political signs. Chris Hubbard, if you'll share that with us. Explain.
Yes, board members, this last election cycle, we had a lot of issues and problems when it came to political signs. My understanding is those issues and others occurred in the previous election before that, before I was here. So what this does is just me trying to get a grasp on the political signs, put some additional, more stringent restrictions on those, where they can be located, the number of signs, make it a little bit easier on the city staff and trying to enforce our regulations.
Chris, did this pick up any comments I have?
Okay, on this ordinance 838, I'd like to open this up for public comment. Would anyone from the public like to come up and speak? Okay.
Lisa Logan, Mexico Beach. I find this interesting, amusing, and a waste of time, actually. This proposal wants to cut down the size of the political signs to half of what they are. It wants to redesign how they're put in the ground, what holds them up. Wants to limit the number of single candidate signs that are on a single property. We have all these regulations in place, have had them, and I am not aware until this year of any really public outcry about the political signs. And the outcry this time was for the location of them. Signs that were on vacant properties and in city right-of-ways. That was the majority of the complaints of the citizens, and they made those complaints very clear multiple times during the campaign. I don't see any reason to fiddle with this. I think the recommendation ought to be leave it alone and then recommend that the current sign ordinances and regulations be enforced, which was the cry of the citizens. They were not being enforced. And let's be done with this and move on to something that's a whole lot more important, like where are we with stormwater? What are we doing for infrastructure problems that we've all brought up? Let's just recommend to the council that you leave it alone, because we've had no real problems with it until the location of it came up this year and the enforcement of it came up this year, and recommend that it be enforced as it is, and let's just move on.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else from the public like to speak on this topic? No? All right, we'll close the public discussion part of this and open it up to board discussion. Anyone on the board have anything they'd like to share?
Sure, I'll speak first. I'm with Lisa. I think it's not worth the effort. I'm a big First Amendment guy, and what I read here is attempting to limit the size and the placement and constitutionally protected free speech. So I think it's something we just need to let go. I also agree with the notion that I believe there's enough ordinances currently on the books that if they're simply enforced, 90% of the problems go.
I agree. I mean, I'm a big First Amendment and Second Amendment and the Constitution guy myself. And, you know, if we cut political signs in half, well, how do we do that and not cut the real estate signs in half? I mean, let's be real. I mean, some people are, you know, we live in a culture now where I supposed to get offended at something Julie says, and I can't just let her have an opinion. I think we leave it alone. I mean, she's got a right to put a sign in her yard, I've got a right to put a sign in mine. As long as we don't put it on the right of way, I don't think there's a problem.
Yeah.
So,
The only thing I can say is, no, I really don't care anything about riding down the road and seeing 20 signs in my yard or your yard. It just looks tacky to me, personally. I don't wanna see 20 signs that I like ice cream.
but to Eric's point, we
Yeah.
do live in a country that's supposedly
Yeah.
still free in a democracy and a republic, so I say let's leave it alone.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like this was all uncharted territory for me when I, got involved in rent. It seemed like the biggest thing was everybody had their own definition of what the right of way was. And, like on this road, well, it's a telephone pole. Well, this road it couldn't be because the roads and the telephone poles were right on it, like, the one on the parallel 98. But on 7th Street, which is a freeway, everybody knew that it was those telephone poles. If you want to make it, and I even kidded with Chris about it, if you want to make it 10 feet from the edge of the road, paved road, so I promise you, the way things are going, somebody's going to be riding up and down that road on their low-speed vehicle with a tape measure. So I get why it's here, or being proposed, but if we could just, if there's anything, just say 10 feet, can't be closer than 10 feet to the road, or 8, or whatever, and just put a hard number on it. And let it go.
I personally don't think there's any problem with the existing definition of right of way. Chris, are you and your staff finding that difficult to interpret?
Well, whenever people put signs out next to the road, some people, like Mr. Henderson was saying, they have their own definition or their own idea of where the right of way and where their property line is. So some people will say that that the road doesn't run in the middle of the right of way, it runs closer to their yard, so they can put their sign out right next to the road because they actually own that part. And that was one of the reasons of trying to put it at a distance away from the house than, putting it just not on the right of way. Now, if you don't like the 10 feet, and Mr. Carey and I talked about this over in the office before the meeting, if you don't want to do it, 10 feet from the house because that's too close to the house, we go 15, we go 20. We know there's a 20-foot setback from the property line, before someone can build a house. So 20 feet should still be on their property, regardless of whether it's next to the road or 50 feet from the road. We know where the setback is on the house. And that was the reason behind that. The other reason behind this, because this ordinance was 100% my idea, and I'm the one that typed it up, is there was a lot of issues that people didn't see. You heard what was being said publicly, but there was issues, especially the final week before the election, that didn't become public, or wasn't public, but it was some major issues.
Apparently, like I know some of mine just vanished, and I talked to the code enforcement Kathy. I didn't touch them. And if I did, I'd throw them in back in the ringer. Somebody decided that I was violating, couldn't tell you why or how, particularly when I'm sitting next to another, a different, I'm not accusing any specific candidate, but there's just too many people in low-speed vehicles that think they have the right to enforce the codes as they interpret it. That's where this all came back.
Sorry, I mumbled. I said, it seems to me the low-speed vehicles is a problem.
Well, there was other language in here that is not just the location of 10 feet from a structure, but I've not been a candidate, but some of these things seem like they would actually be a hardship to a candidate, if I'm reading it right, that the bottom of the sign must be at ground level. Well, when you purchase those signs, don't they have the little stand that it's not at ground level, it's 6 to 8 to 10 inches off?
Sometimes you can't push it all the way through the ground.
Yeah.
Because if it's hard ground, you won't get it to the bottom.
So you might have people with measuring tapes arguing ground level, so.
I have strong opinions about changing anything having to do with the sign and what it says and its size. I don't have a strong opinion about setbacks and locations and right of way. me personally, I think the definition of the right of way is good enough. Because there are facts out there, you can look up, you wanna go get the plans, you get the engineering drawings from when your house was built, that had to be pulled by the developer. You can go find the exact, down to the centimeter, you can find out on your property where that right of way is. It's a pain in the neck to do, it's difficult for code enforcement, we're now just piling more on the code enforcement officer. But that's my thought.
Yeah, I guess the last thing, I kind of agreeing with y'all. This was a particularly contentious election for a lot of reasons. The emotions were running higher than they seemed to have run before, well, cyclical. But the minds, I don't think this proposal will address the basis of the mindset. Just, they'll be measuring something else. So, it's just kind of rolling along. So that would be.
So where are we on this one, Mr. Attorney?
Well, you're gonna need a motion to either recommend or recommend not enact.
Would anyone like to make a motion to recommend or deny this?
I'll make a motion to deny.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Henderson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a second from Mr. Cox. Is there any further discussion? And if not, we'll call for a vote.
Ms. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Elsey,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
and Mr. Henderson.
I'm tempted to say no, but I'm going to say yes. Just unanimity, frightening.
I believe that's everything we have before us. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn. Do you have a second on that? Yes. All right. All right. We have a motion and a second. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.